Hi everybody, this is Laura Susan Johnson with Period Pieces. How far would you go to avoid being beaten up by the school bully? I'm going to review one of my all-time favorite comedies of yore. It's called 3 O'Clock High, and I remember watching it quite a bit back in the 80s when I was about 17, 18 years old when it first came out. Now, one thing I noticed about this film right off the bat is that the way people were dressed and the way they had their hair cut, it looked more like, instead of being like 1987, 1988, it looked like 1984, 1985. I just noticed that. Teenagers are so fashion, they're so the crosshairs, our eyes are so tuned to fashion, especially girls, that the way they were dressed, the way they had the brooches. I remember that in my freshman year, which was 85 to 86. And before that, when I was in grade school, they had brooches. They'd have these really asymmetric hairdos. They'd have brooches. They'd wear really tailored, blazers. They'd have the feathered hair, or they'd have the emo hair like one of the characters. I'll get into that in a second. But I did remember that. It's almost as if they filmed it and it was delayed. The release was delayed by maybe at least 2 to 3 years. But it's a great film. I'm not saying anything bad about the film. I'm just saying it just seems like it might be delayed. This camera seems a little bit cloudy. I think I just made it worse. I keep tape over it just in case I accidentally leave it on. Anyway, 3 O'Clock High stars Casey Siemaszko, who is the twin, well, maybe not the twin, but at least the brother of Nina Siemaszko, who, she's been in a few things. He's been in a few things, but first I'll talk about her. She's been in License to Drive, which is another comedy I'll review. That's another favorite comedy of mine. She was also in Suicide Kings, which is a kind of a film noir Christopher Walken movie, and she was in an episode of CSI Las Vegas, and it was a really good episode. Other than that, I don't know if I've seen her in a whole lot. I'm sure she's been in tons of stuff. I just haven't seen it. But anyway, Casey Siemaszko, I mostly know him for being one of those hoodlums who picked on the Stand By Me boys. He was the one that was getting the snake tattoo, and he was talking about, I've been dating her for over a month now, and all she'll do is let me feel her tits. So, but, in 3 O'Clock High, he plays a very sweet kid. He plays a very kind of, not what I would call a nerd or even a geek, just a regular kid. Not the most popular kid, but he has a girlfriend, and he has, a few friends. Not the most popular kid in school, but also not an outcast. He's does activities. He does the school paper. He also does, let me think. I know he does the school paper. Oh, yes, in the student bookstore. So Casey Siemaszko plays a kid named Jerry. And 3 O'Clock High shows just what a normal trouble-free, you know, a kid who avoids trouble and is generally a good kid will do to avoid getting beaten up by a bully. It's a regular day at school, and then suddenly there's this new kid at school. He's just coming to school that day. But the whole school is abuzz with this kid. He's got a reputation everywhere he goes. His name is Buddy Revell. And he's played by Richard Tyson. Now, Richard Tyson, that should ring a bell for you if you ever saw Kindergarten Cop. He was the bad guy in that. He was the one that was trying to kidnap the kid from Penelope Ann Miller and Arnold Schwarzenegger and, what was her name? Pamela Reed were trying to rescue the kid. Now, in this movie, believe it or not, Richard Tyson almost looks like a baby-faced Arnold Schwarzenegger. He looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his pre-Terminator days, but without that really gap-toothed look. He just almost looks, I know, it's just weird. He's a big, it kind of looks young enough to be in high school, but he's just big. He's a big, brutish, just a real, he has a scowl on his face all the time. He's a scary guy, and he's got a scary reputation following him around. So, he plays Buddy Revell. Buddy, what a name for a bully. I guess that was the best name they could come up with. I would have called him, you know, Butch. But anyway, Stacey Glick plays Jerry, the good kid's little sister. Jonathan Wise plays this really nerdy sidekick for Jerry. That kind of gets him into trouble. He kind of sets him up. He's the head of the journalism class, and he sets Jerry up to interview Buddy. Like, hello, how are you? Welcome to our school. Like that kind of a journalism piece. And then you have Jeffrey Tambor, a very young Jeffrey Tambor, who plays the, I guess, the teacher, the staff member who is in charge of the student store where Jerry works to sell, you know, student supplies. And other cast members that I was really shocked to see: Philip Baker Hall. He plays kind of a detective. Mitch Pileggi, I never knew how to pronounce his name. He plays a school security kind of a cop, and he's really funny. John P. Ryan, that's a name I want to remember for my review I'm going to do right after this, because that's what kind of tells me that this movie came out 2 to 3 years after it was filmed, because John P. Ryan's in another movie I'm going to review next that came out, you know, that was released in '87, just like this one. This one was released in 1987, and it appears to have been filmed in '84, perhaps. John P. Ryan looks completely different in this movie than in the one that was released in '87 that I'm going to review after this one. Mike Jolly plays kind of a jock. And Jerry tries to get him to fight Buddy and maybe beat him up so that he doesn't have to face Buddy. I mean, Jerry, in comparison to this big bully, Jerry's a little twerp. He's never, you know, he can't. Logic suggests that he cannot beat up such a huge guy, a very tall. And he's been on the football team, apparently, because this jock has played against him. One character I really thought was hilarious was Mark. He was that really skinny, big, doe-eyed kid. And he always wore a red beret, and he was saying, "Oh, we're making bets about your fight. Try to keep it under 3 minutes." He was played by Theron Reed, and Theron Reed, I guess, passed away a few years ago. Which was sad. And it's a real classic movie. The fashions are fun to look at. It's an 80s period piece. Aaron Spelling and Steven Spielberg were both on the roster for the credits, but they didn't get along, so Steven Spielberg removed his name off the credits, and Aaron Spelling remained on the credits. The way this story is told is so clever. The camera work is so clever. You see these sudden swoops and sudden, fast. The camera, the motion is fast, like in an old silent movie. It's so clever and so hilarious. And you see this scene of Jerry sitting in not O'Rourke's office, but Dolinsky. I don't know if Dolinsky's like the dean or the vice president or the principal. I know O'Rourke, who's played by John P. Ryan. He's somebody important. But there's like two. Maybe he's the vice principal. I don't know. There's two authority figures in the school. There's Dolinsky and then there's O'Rourke. O'Rourke's the nicer one. Dolinsky's just this real stern, kind of scowling kind of guy. When he's sitting in Dolinsky's office, there's this scene where you see this, I don't know, like a figure of, like a statue or something like a knight, and then you see he has all these animals mounted on his wall, and you hear all these roaring sounds and men screaming. It's funny. It's the effect. It's just the timing. The comedy timing is absolutely genius. It's really probably I know it's got plenty of fans, probably even mainstream fans, but to me it's like this gem that's not really appreciated very much, and it has more of a Spielberg vibe to it than a Spelling vibe. I mean, Spelling, you think of Aaron Spelling and automatically 90210 and Melrose Place come to mind, and that's just generic shit. Pretty people with their love lives, and I'm sorry, but that's just, to me, that's Aaron Spelling's reputation. It's just boring. Spielberg, you can hate him, you can hate some of his work, you can love him. I love most of his stuff. Everything from The Color Purple to Jaws to Schindler's List. I mean, he does everything pretty well, even Hook, which a lot of people hate. But it's just some of this stuff is so laugh out loud funny. The only thing that disappoints me is Franny. That's Jerry's girlfriend. For a little kind of a average, kind of a smallish average guy, just a hardworking kid, good student. He does have a really pretty girlfriend. She dresses very stylishly. She has sort of an emo girl haircut. And that I did see that in high school in the 80s. That wasn't uncommon. It's not like she's out of her time frame, but most of the other girls had the feathered hair. And she stood out that way, her look stood out, but she kept saying, "Oh, I have this spirit guide named Ethan, and I'm going to go talk to him for you." And it all happens off screen. And she's just what I would call Nellie, non-essential love interest. I mean, it's nice that he has a girlfriend. It's nice that she's supportive, but she doesn't have a whole lot to do beyond these crazy, like the spirit guide stuff, which is fine. But if you saw this Ethan person, or if you saw her interacting with him, or really bringing messages to Jerry about what he could do, all she says is, "Oh, Ethan says you're in great trouble," or something like that. I don't remember exactly. It was so forgettable. That would be my only. I actually saw Karen as a lot more charming. Karen's the pretty blonde girl that, at first she's kind of annoyed with him because he's so, first he sees her while they're driving their cars to school. She just happens to lap him as they're driving to school. And he runs a red light. But she's really pretty. She's charming. She seems concerned for him. So he ends up with this really hilarious, almost like a love square. And I'll explain the fourth party in the square. Ms. Farmer, the teacher. Now, this was hilarious. She's in his reading class, I guess book report class, English class, whatever. And she is so funny. She is like out of another time period. She's sitting there. She looks like somebody out of the Anne of Green Gables time era. She has her dress, the collar is all the way up to here. She's gorgeous, by the way. This is a gorgeous woman. She has the prettiest, pert little nose, the most beautiful face. She has this beautiful kind of blondish hair. And she's got it up in a Gibson hairdo. I couldn't do that to save my life. I've always loved that look. It's just beautiful. She's got her brooch right here at her neck. The collar's all the way up to here. Her sleeves are here. She just looks like she stepped out of 1908. And somebody says to Jerry, "I know how you can avoid that fight with Buddy Revell. Try to get yourself put in detention." Well, what class do you have next? Well, I guess I have to give a book report next. Well, then give the worst book report you can possibly give. Do something that's gonna make you get into hot trouble. Misbehave. Have the teacher send your ass to detention or something, and just get into trouble, then there's no way Buddy can touch you. So he grabs a pack of cigarettes, he puts on a pair of shades, and he does a book report on some really racy title. Bunny Goes to Hollywood or something like that. It's just really like he picked up a porn about that thick. And he talks about the expository passages, and when Bunny meets the whole hockey team and stuff like that. And almost reminded me of you, Miss Farmer. And she just stands up and she's just mesmerized, and he lights his cigarette up, and he's that was so funny. That was when Jerry, this good little nice shy kid that most of the students hadn't noticed until this day that Buddy Revell arrived in school. No one really noticed Jerry, and suddenly everybody's noticing him, and they all know, because it's a small school, that he's going to fight this great big gigantic guy at the end of the day. They're all just noticing him, and when he does this thing with the book report, that's the closest I saw him come to the character in Stand By Me, where he's this, kind of a gang member type thing. But it was so hilarious, and he asked Miss Farmer, "What's your favorite book?" And she goes, "Turn of the Screw." What a coincidence. And he kisses her, and then the little bug-eyed guy there on read, he goes, "That's what I call a book report," because Jerry's hypoglycemic. It's really funny. I'm sorry, this book report, this movie review is all over the place, but it is so funny. It's just it's really a gem. This movie is. It's a gem. He does everything in his power. She doesn't send him to detention. She loved the book report so much that she even wants him to call her at her home later that night, the teacher. I mean, he's got his girlfriend who wants to bone him. He's got this pretty blonde girl who's interested in him now, after she acted a little put off by him earlier. And now he's got this teacher, which, really doesn't fly, but it's really funny at the same time. I mean, he tried to pay off a jock to beat up Buddy Revell, and the jock got his nose broken for his trouble. And I forgot to mention that the jock wanted money. So where did Jerry get the money? He robbed the store he works at, the student store. He went in there while there was a fire drill set off by his good nerdy buddy Vincent, and it's just everything he could possibly do, he tried, so that he wouldn't have to fight this gigantic, unbeatable guy. He didn't want to be beaten to a bloody pulp. But at the end of the day, nothing worked. So he goes up to Buddy and he says, "What if I paid you not to fight me?" And Buddy says, "All right, I'll take the money, but you gotta be the biggest pussy I've ever met in my life. You didn't even try. How did that feel?" And suddenly Jerry realizes, this feels worse than getting beaten up. This feels worse. Now I feel, I'm not trying to condone violence. Of course not. But it kind of feels bad when you're just starting to make new friends, and I guess you're just starting to become somebody. You're starting to rise up above, I guess, the Charlie Brown, syndrome, where you're really unnoticed and don't feel like you have a whole lot going on in life. I don't know. I mean, to me, he was accomplished. He was on the school paper. He ran the school bookstore. I mean, he was a good student, Never had a mark against him. And then all in one day, it kind of fell down. But at the same time, he was, I guess, having a good and bad day. He'd had all these moments, and at the same time, he knew he couldn't get out of that fight unless he paid Buddy. And then when he paid Buddy, Buddy insulted him anyway, and that felt even worse. So he thought about it for a few minutes, and then he ran right up to Buddy and said, "Yes, we're going to fight." So I don't think the fighting made Jerry a man per se, but I think Jerry had to prove to himself that he is not just some weakling. Even if he gets beat to a bloody pulp, maybe at least he tried. But the thing is, Buddy Revell had brass knuckles, and that's cheating. Uh, a lot of people on the IMDb board said, oh well, Buddy rightfully won that fight because Franny, the girlfriend, the emo-haired girlfriend, jumped on his back and started trying to beat up on him, and he was about to use his brass knuckles, and then Franny jumped on him and they got thrown on the ground. And then the sister, Bray, played by Stacey Glick, she seems familiar, but I don't think I've seen her in anything else. She grabbed those brass knuckles and she gave them to Jerry. Does that mean Jerry cheated? Well, Buddy was going to use them, and Buddy's a huge guy with probably a lot of PSI behind his punches, plus the brass knuckles. That would have torn Jerry's face off. So Jerry's punch probably would have been a lot weaker, but nevertheless, Jerry used those brass knuckles. They were there, they were available. Bray gave them to him, and they knocked Buddy cold. So who won the fight? I don't know who won the fight. The main thing is Buddy gained respect for Jerry because Jerry not only arrived and said, okay, I'm going to go to that parking lot at 3 o'clock. You're not going to call me names. You're not going to insult me. And Buddy brought his money back. And the students helped him pay all that money back that he took the money for, because he was so desperate to try to get out of fighting. You know, it might be one of those things where you could say, a lot of people probably said, oh, this movie glorifies, but it's just a comedy, though. It's a good comedy. It's funny. It's clever. It has, I think, a good message about respecting people who stand up to you, and for all we know, Buddy could have been his friend after that, or Buddy could have just gone off and been the same self, but he wouldn't have picked on Jerry again. I would give it 9 out of 10, 9.5 even, because it was a real good. I mean, 80s comedies